Oh, we have a full week of games, including tonight's Spurs and Thunder rematch. Sunday night, we have a finals rematch of sorts. LeBron James' current team will face his former team. The Lakers host the Cavs. LeBron's still out with that injury. Tuesday, it's a doubleheader featuring the Lakers again as a nightcap. Pay close attention to Thursday afternoon, 3 o'clock game from London between the Wizards and the Knicks. And that will conclude a busy week of games right here on NBA TV. So we've officially passed the halfway point of the regular season. There's a line of demarcation in the top 5 teams in the Eastern Conference. We seem to know who they are heading towards the postseason. Unless there's a collapse, those 5 teams will be in. So your 6 through 11 teams all hovering around 500. Taking a look at those teams you see right there. Let's start with the Miami Heat because they seem to be in most control of their destiny. Justice Winslow now running the offense, 9-4 in their last 13 games. Brendan, why is that working so well for them, having Justice run that offense?
Well, I think they really have a diversified portfolio in their game anyway. They don't really have a true point guard. They have multiple guards out there, multiple guys that can handle the ball. Justice gives them a defensive toughness, a tenacity, and he's improved his jump shot tremendously from when he first came out. So I think it works for their team, but they basically just getting their best guys out there, their athletic guys, and they're letting them all go out there and play and have an impact on the game.
Griff, when we look at the Brooklyn Nets, that seems like a miraculous accomplishment by the front office, okay, because they're competitive now. Karis LeVert emerges as one of their best players. He goes down, and they just seem to respond by winning more games, winning 13 of their last 18. Can we assume that they're going to be in the mix in the playoffs as well?
It's interesting. I think they're one of the teams that has to decide if they're a seller or a buyer. And when I look at their circumstance, I think you probably call them a team that's still trying to accumulate assets. They're going to keep trying to add picks. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Sean Marks and Trajan Langdon look at potentially moving somebody along the lines of Joe Harris, by way of example, who's on a tremendously team-friendly contract. He's shooting 48.5% from 3.
They can't move our guy Joe, Griff. That's our guy.
Well, I understand, and the thing for me is they actually made it possible for Joe to become Joe, in large part because Kenny Atkinson has built the environment that he has there. They are a team that tells each other what they need to hear. They have very high accountability standards there, and guys play both sides of the floor with equal passion. And so Joe has gotten an opportunity to really thrive there. But I also think that if you're in the situation they're in, adding picks would be really significant for them. And while they could probably make a playoff run and a playoff push, they may not think they can do damage in the playoffs, and maybe you push things down the road one more year. It's a possibility.
Do you think that the young guys would benefit, though, from being in the playoffs and getting that experience, though?
I do think there's value in that, but I also think if you get into the first round of the playoffs and it's a mismatch when you're there, they only get so much out of that. And the long-term benefit of getting additional picks that you can build around, probably greater. Now, the counter-argument to this is, look, Joe Harris is there for next year. If they're going to try to be good next year and be a playoff team, how do you live without a guy that shoots quite like that? And I could hear that argument as well.
Well, taking a trip out west, when we look at the Utah Jazz, that's a team that we just all assumed would take a leap this season. And early in the year, they seemed to take a step back. Now they seem to be making that leap as far as Donovan Mitchell finding his stride. Last year, they got Rudy Gobert back to make their playoff push. This year, that wasn't the case. They were healthy and still struggled early on. What do you see from them now that's got them back on the winning track?
Well, ironically, I think one of the things that happened is they've had so many injuries to their point guards, they've needed Donovan Mitchell to be more ball dominant, and they've needed him to value possessions more. I think Donovan was really struggling early on with the quality of shots he was taking. His decision-making was lacking a little bit, and I think what you've seen in the absence of the other available playmakers, he's sort of taken the onus to be a little bit more mindful of quality of shot, getting other people involved. And certainly the number one issue is they've committed themselves to the defensive side of the floor at the same rate they did last year. They were all about overachieving at one point last year, and they came into this season maybe thinking they were better than they were. They're a young team. They're not used to taking people's best shots. But the schedule gets a lot easier from here on out from them, and you should see them be able to make some strides.
Yeah, and another thing is that Rudy Gobert has played very strong for them as well. He's continued to be beastly on the boards. He has been big inside. He has been eating the glass, 13 rebounds per game on the season. And when you have a big man in that like that that's giving you those extra possessions, he's able to block shots at the rim. He's able to control the paint on both ends, and that has a value for a team like Utah that's, they're not the most talented up and down team in the world. So a guy that can, when you slow it down, a guy that can have an impact defensively and then give you extra possessions on the other end, he's key for you. Also, he closes out possessions with great defensive rebounding.
I also think one of the things that happened to them early in the year is the new defensive rules took a big impact on them and had a big impact on them, and took a little while for them to figure out how to adjust to it, because both Joe Ingles and Jay Crowder can be very good defensively, but they were doing it with a little bit of physicality at one point. So they had to adjust to that. And when you also don't have ball dominant play creators like a lot of the better teams in the Western Conference, if that's going to be something that's at a premium because the officials are letting you drive now
Right.
with almost impunity, not having another driver is a big issue as well.
Well, certainly the Houston Rockets have a guy driving that team, and James Harden and what he's accomplishing as you see the Rockets just skyrocketing up the standings. But then we also look at the Sacramento Kings, right? They started off red hot, 3-6 in their last 9. That backcourt dynamic at times with De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield. But do you think they're still a season away from being a team you can see in the postseason and able to try to contend to at least win a round?
Certainly win around, I think that's true. I think it's interesting the two teams you just mentioned, Houston and Sacramento, one after the other, because you've got teams that are trying to play the complete opposite style of ball. Sacramento wants to force tempo as often as they can, and what happens in a circumstance like that, particularly with a young team, is you will be a very high turnover team. You will be somewhat mistake prone. De'Aaron Fox has been special good to this point. I think as he continues to grow and evolve, the expectation that team should have of itself will grow as well, because he is a guy who can take them a very long way. But again, they may have been a year ahead of themselves.
Yeah, I think this team is a year away. I think this backcourt is very good. They do have the outside chance to maybe sneak into the playoffs and maybe grab that 8th seed or the 7th seed. But a young backcourt like this is still going to take some time. There's still going to be some things that they're going to need to learn, some bumps in the road that they're going to go through. And I think they're going to be better for it. But in the short term, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. I definitely don't see them winning a round, because if you're the 8th seed or the 7th seed, there's a strong chance you run into a team like Denver or Golden State. That probably wouldn't be good for Sacramento at this time. But Sacramento fans, they say it's all purple talk out there, whatever. Listen, the future is very bright. This backcourt is dynamic. And in a couple of years, when we see other backcourts slow down, we might be saying this is the backcourt of the future. They definitely have next.
So looking at the bottom half of the Western Conference, trying to make that playoff push of the teams you see there, who do you think will end up eventually into the postseason, and who do you think will be home thinking, we were close but no cigar?
Well, two of the teams that are outside the playoffs and just outside the playoffs right now that stand out to me, Utah, despite all the injuries that they have.
Absolutely.
Because they have the easiest schedule against the rest of the way in the entire league, which is hard to do in the Western Conference. Their opponents have a 48% winning percentage the rest of the way. That's a much easier road to hoe than some of the teams that are above them. And then I look at New Orleans. And both of these teams have the best scoring differential of the teams that are just on the outside of the playoffs. And I think those are teams that are very likely to make a run. And depending on what happens with the Lakers and LeBron James, the length of his injury and his absence will have a great deal to say about who makes the playoffs and who doesn't.
Right.
Certainly something we're going to have to keep an eye out on the West Coast, trying to figure out, okay, what team still has the goods, what team does not. And when you look at Sacramento coming into this season, they've already overachieved, right? They've already gone to a place we didn't know that they would be. When you look at their roster overall, and you look at the backcourt, you think that's solidified, and they have a young player in Marvin Bagley and another guy they're developing in Harry Giles. What do you think their biggest need is as far as what they're going to try to do in the offseason in position they can grow fastest and most?
Well, I think one of the things you've seen when they've talked about potential trades for Sacramento, and they've been linked to Enes Kanter by way of example, I think they're looking for a big who can score in the paint. I think they're looking for somebody that they can believe in at the 5 a little bit more offensively than Willie Cauley-Stein. At the same time, I'm not exactly sure that's the direction I would go if I was them, because the defensive component is so important, the rim protection component is so important. Enes Kanter is not a defensive player in any way. And a team that wants to play that fast, giving up that many possessions, playing with fives that aren't going to protect the rim would scare me quite a bit. So I understand that they want some interior presence, but I think they may be better off just letting it grow together with the young kids.
Right.
Tonight in Salt Lake City, there's LeBron James. He and the 8th place Lakers will run. Well, he won't, but the 9th place Jazz are going to host them in this game. These two teams are separated by 2 games in the West standings. Utah wins tonight. It's a 1-game separation. LA wins tonight. It is a 3-game separation. A big one from Salt Lake City. And right now, we welcome in live on Arena Link, Lakers sideline reporter for Spectrum Sports Net, Mike Trudell. And Mike, it is great to see you. We know that LeBron James is going to miss at least the next 3 games, but he might return next Thursday against OKC on TNT. Are you optimistic about his chances of playing in that game?
Rick, first of all, it's great to see you, man, as always. And I'll just tell you what everybody else knows, or maybe doesn't know is a better way to put it, about LeBron, and that's whether or not he'll return in that game. We do know he's going to be reevaluated after these next 3 games, and you would theoretically think if all went well, maybe he can return for game action, but he is yet to practice yet, right? They haven't started to ramp things up. We don't have any reports of progress in that sense, other than the fact that he, of course, is improving just by not being out there in games. So it is a little bit of a wait-and-see mode, Rick, as the Lakers try to survive in what you mentioned is a very tight Western Conference playoff race.
No doubt about it, man. And what have the Lakers learned? I mean, you're with them every game and seeing it up close and personal. What have they learned about themselves in these 8 games without LeBron?
You know, so they're starting to get better. I think you have to put it into context as well that it's not just LeBron that's out. It's Rajon Rondo, who is kind of a secondary leader and playmaker, and then they missed Kyle Kuzma for 2.5 games when he had a lower back contusion, and we saw what Kuz did last game when he dropped 41 in 3 quarters. So that was certainly a key additional piece. When you have 3 guys out, it just makes things tricky. But the simple fact of it, Rick, offense is what's dropped off completely without LeBron. They ranked 28th in the league in offensive efficiency since LeBron went out on Christmas Day. Defense, on the other hand, has been great. They've actually been the 2nd best defensive team in the entire NBA over the course of that time frame. So that's what we've seen. LeBron has been that important to the offense. And, you know, you got to shout out Rondo a little bit, too, for what he'd been doing.
No doubt. Great point and great stats right there as well. Now, Luke Walton recently told Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball to play with more passion. How was that message received?
Well, he said it after the Minnesota game, which was one of the worst games of the season for the Lakers. They weren't in it really right from the start. And Rick, you know, especially for a couple of Minnesota guys like you and myself, probably watched that one. And as things went for the next couple of games, though, they really answered the bell. That was for a tough road win in Dallas, where the Mavs had been 15-3. And then, of course, the Lakers beat Detroit rather handily at home. And the way that Luke put it into context was, look, he always expects more from these players. It wasn't so much a criticism and a critique, although, of course, he was criticizing the last couple of games that they had put in. But when LeBron went out, that changed what the expectation was for those 2 players. And sometimes it takes a bit of an adjustment time from when you're just you're operating under a certain context when LeBron's on the court, and then when he's not, you do have to change the approach. And Luke went to the public, and so far they've responded. And look, they're going to need him to do so again tonight if the Lakers are hopeful to get a win in a tough place to play right here in Utah.
Mike, really appreciate it, man. You know I'll be texting you in the days to come for intel on your Lakers. Enjoy the game, safe travels, and we'll talk soon.
Hey, my pleasure. Always good to see you, man.
That's my dude right there, Mike Trudell, Rick Kamla, Steve Smith, and Brendan Haywood here on Game Time Live, presented by State Farm. Now, Kyle Kuzma dropped a career-high 41 Wednesday in 29 minutes. It was a wide score, so his services weren't required in the 4th quarter. Last year, 16.1. This year, 18.8. Put his ascension into perspective.
Well, what I like about it is sometimes you score some points when you're not winning games. And now he's added to his point average, Brendan and Rick, and they're winning games. And he works on his game. He has the mindset and the size and ability to be a great guy to play off a guy like LeBron James or even off Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball before LeBron got there. This kid is a scorer's mentality. And I look at him as, yes, he doesn't pass a lot, Brendan and Rick, but this kid is a scorer, and it doesn't bother him. I am what I am. I play hard. I work on my game. I've been knowing him and seeing him since he was young in high school. This kid has that type of ability.
I think it's amazing when you look at his ascension I think what's really truly amazing about it is the fact that he wasn't supposed to be the guy. The guy that was supposed to make the big jump and be LeBron James' number 2 was Brandon Ingram. And when you look at how it's gone, he hasn't stepped on anybody's toes. He's just maximized his potential, and he's taken advantage of opportunities when they presented himself to them, like LeBron James being out right now. Now it's my chance to go for 40 and help us win a basketball game. That's something he might not have a chance to do when LeBron is there. So I look at him taking advantage of opportunity, the way he plays, the confidence, and I think that we're going to see him play even better because this was a guy that shot 36% from 3 last year. This year, he's only shooting 30% from 3, and he's taking 6 threes a game. So that's a low percentage to take that amount of threes. We know he's going to catch up to that number that he shot last year at some point, and when he does, look for his scoring average to possibly go over 20.
And also, Brendan, he's going to have to rebound the basketball better. At that size, I can't come up with them 1 and 2s. He's going to have to get on the glass at that size.
And I know Brendan was clocking the rebound column in that 41-point game the other night.
Well, he normally averages about 6 rebounds. So I'm just going to say that's one of those anomaly games where he had it going, and he was just focusing strictly on his offense. When LeBron comes back,
Go get on the glass.
Hey, when LeBron comes back, he'll be back to rebound again.
On the glass.
Look, Blake Griffin played 37 minutes the other night and had no rebounds, all right? It happens sometimes. Let's